My ex used my trauma against me, so I left without a trace. He said it with a smirk. You're overreacting. Probably just triggered again. We were in the car. I had just asked him why he didn't text me back for 2 days. He looked out the window like I wasn't even there. I can't do this emotional chaos all the time, he added. Chaos. That's what he called my trauma. The trauma I told him about in confidence. The nights I couldn't breathe. The panic attacks. The years it took me to even open my mouth and say the word abuse. He was the first person I trusted with that story. And he threw it back at me like a punchline. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at him. And thought, you just made the worst mistake of your life. Because you don't get to weaponize what broke me. And then pretend you're the victim when I walk away. That night, I packed a bag. Not in anger. Not in fear. Just. With finality. Toothbrush. Journal. Passport? I didn't slam the drawers. I didn't leave a note. I left the apartment at 2:14 a.m. While he was snoring. While my heart was still racing but my hands were steady. I walked into the cold night air and felt more peace in that first breath than I had in the last 6 months. I turned off my phone. Deleted every message. Blocked his number. Blocked his friends. I didn't tell anyone where I was for 3 days. Not because I was hiding. But because I was done explaining why I left someone who made pain feel like a conversation starter. I stayed with a friend out of town. Spent those days doing nothing but sleeping, writing, breathing. The silence? It didn't feel empty. It felt sacred. I didn't return to pack the rest of my things. I didn't want them. Because nothing in that apartment belonged to the version of me that was finally free. And when he realized I was gone. Really gone. He sent one last message from a new number, so you're really gonna ghost me like that? I didn't respond. Because some ghosts aren't dead. They're just done haunting themselves for what someone else did. And that's what I was now. Unburdened. And finally, completely, gone. I met him when I wasn't looking. Isn't that how they always say it goes? I was in therapy. Still raw. Still learning how to say things like I deserve better without my voice shaking. And there he was, charming, funny, warm in a way that made me think, maybe this time will be different. He asked about my favorite books. Made me playlists. Sent little thinking of you texts that showed up exactly when I needed them. I told myself not to fall too fast. But when someone makes you feel seen after years of disappearing into someone else's shadow, it's easy to mistake attention for safety. I told him about my past slowly, the trauma. The anxiety. The way I still woke up sometimes with my chest tight for no reason. He held my hand through it. Told me I was brave. Called me a warrior. He made me believe healing didn't have to be lonely. But then. The shift. It didn't scream. It whispered. One night I flinched when he raised his voice during a movie. He paused it and said, "Wow. Didn't know you were still that broken." I laughed it off. Told myself he didn't mean it like that. Another time, I was quiet after a bad therapy session. He said, "You're exhausting when you get like this." I apologized. Brought him dinner. Tried to be easier. And he rewarded me. With a kiss. With a compliment. Pavlov would have been proud. I trained myself to be digestible. To only share my feelings in bite-sized pieces he could chew without gagging. To smile even when I felt like unraveling. Because if I was too much, he'd remind me of who I used to be. The broken version. The hard-to-love version. The one I worked so damn hard to grow out of. But the truth is, I wasn't too much. I was honest. He just preferred when I lied to myself for his comfort. And every time I bent a little more to make him feel strong, I became someone I didn't recognize. But deep down, I was still there. Still watching. Still remembering. And eventually, I'd remember loudly. The gaslighting didn't come with warning labels. It came in small corrections. That's not what I said. You're remembering it wrong. You always twist things when you're emotional. At first, I tried to explain myself calmly. Like maybe if I said it the right way, he'd understand. But the rules kept changing. If I cried, I was manipulative. If I stayed calm, I was cold. If I asked for space, I was pushing him away. If I asked for closeness, I was clingy. I once spent 2 hours apologizing for the tone I used when asking if he'd done the dishes. He said I was coming at him. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. But it must be something." And that was the problem. I was always trying to earn the bare minimum. I went back through old texts, messages where I tried to advocate for myself. I felt really alone last night. I need you to listen instead of fix. His responses were copy-pasted blame. You're always looking for problems. You're just looking for something to be upset about. One night I said, "Sometimes I just need to talk without being dissected." He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Maybe you should talk to your therapist about that, not me." And it hit me, he didn't want me to heal. He wanted me to stay broken. Just enough to need him, just enough to keep quiet. Just enough to be grateful for crumbs. The last straw wasn't explosive. I had a panic attack in the middle of a grocery store. Completely unprovoked. Just short of breath, dizzy, spiraling. I texted him, "I need you. Can you talk?" 10 minutes passed. Then 15. He replied, "Not now. Can we not do this today?" I sat on the bench outside the store and realized something. I wasn't his partner. I was his inconvenience. He liked the idea of my healing story, but not the reality of my healing process. And I was done being a project. Done being the version of myself that begged to be believed. That was the last time I asked him to hold space for my pain. And the first time I made space for myself. He thought I was getting better. More agreeable. Less reactive. I smiled more. Nodded through conversations. Stopped bringing things up. And that's what he wanted, a version of me he could narrate. He didn't realize I was studying him. That every silence was strategy. That every "you're right" was me taking mental notes. I started separating my life into 2 layers, the part he saw. And the part that was mine again. I got a second checking account. Started moving small amounts of money. Just paying off a card, I'd say. I applied for a new job. Interviewed during my lunch breaks. I made a list, what I'd take with me. What I'd leave behind. Who to call when I finally said I'm done. I even set up a Google Drive folder with scanned copies of my birth certificate, license, insurance, just in case. I wasn't running. I was preparing. Because leaving someone who manipulates you emotionally is like sneaking out of a house that doesn't have doors, just alarms. And I didn't want the explosion. I wanted peace. One night, he said, "I'm proud of you. You've been a lot more manageable lately." I smiled. "Thank you." And in that moment, I knew, he would never see me coming. I stayed 3 more weeks. Not out of love. Out of timing. During that time, I watched him like a scientist with a lab rat. Counted how often he lied. Tracked how he flipped every moment back onto me. I kept receipts. Of his words. Of mine. Of the way I dimmed every time he entered the room. I scheduled a moving truck in secret. Booked a short-term rental. Made a checklist on paper. He once asked what I was always writing. I said, just journaling. And that was the truth. Just not all of it. Because some days I wrote, "Today, he called me fragile again." And other days I wrote, "3 more weeks, and I'll be free." It was a Tuesday. Sunny. Quiet. He thought I was going to the grocery store. I kissed his cheek on the way out. Said, "I'll be back in an hour." That was the last lie I ever told him. I had the car packed the night before. The essentials. Nothing sentimental. Because there was nothing in that apartment I couldn't live without, except peace. And I was already taking that with me. I drove to the new apartment. My name on the lease. My own set of keys. I turned on music. Opened the windows. Sat on the floor and cried, not from sadness. From stillness. From knowing that for the first time in years, no one was waiting to tear me down. He called 2 hours later. I didn't answer. He texted, "Did you forget something?" I read it. Then blocked the number. I didn't send a long goodbye. Didn't send him closure. Because he wasn't confused. He was just used to me staying. I emailed the landlord, transferred the utilities. Left a forwarding address for my final paycheck. I didn't go back for my things. Didn't ask for my favorite mug. Didn't ask for the books we bought together. Because I didn't want anything from that version of me. The version who begged to be understood by someone who used her pain like leverage. I was done explaining. Done justifying. Done holding space for a man who treated my vulnerability like a weapon he could load whenever he got bored. 2 weeks later, a mutual friend messaged me. He says he's shocked. Said you just vanished. I replied with one sentence, he didn't notice I was disappearing the whole time. And that was the end of it. No drama. No screaming. No final confrontation. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't beg. Doesn't wait. Doesn't explain. It simply says, you don't have access to me anymore. And that silence? It was louder than anything I'd ever said. Healing didn't show up like a lightning bolt. It crept in. Quiet. Gentle. Unannounced. It was the first morning I made coffee and didn't check my phone. The first night I fell asleep without rehearsing a conversation in my head. I stopped waiting for the next blow. The next mood swing. The next apology I'd have to write for simply having emotions. My apartment was small. But it was mine. My playlists. My books. My boundaries. I danced while brushing my teeth. Let dishes pile up just because I felt like resting. Sat on the balcony with my journal and wrote whatever came out, not curated. Not filtered. Just honest. I started going on long walks again. No destination. No timeline. Just me and the air and the reminder that I wasn't small anymore. I reconnected with friends I had quietly drifted away from. They welcomed me back like I never left. Because that's what real people do, they hold space, not scorecards. I stopped needing to explain why I left. I didn't owe anyone a PowerPoint on how it feels to live in a relationship where you're slowly being erased. I didn't owe anyone a breakdown to justify my exit. I just lived. And with every day, I came back to myself. I took up hobbies I used to love but abandoned to make space for his insecurities. I signed up for a writing workshop. I posted a poem. It went viral. The caption read, "She stopped explaining." And somehow, everything got louder. People messaged me from all over. I didn't know someone else had lived this too. This gave me the strength to leave. Thank you for not being quiet. And I realized something, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need validation. I didn't even need closure. What I needed was this, a life where I wasn't constantly editing myself to survive. And now? I don't survive. I exist. I thrive, I expand. And no one gets to shrink me again. These days, I don't flinch when someone says I'm too sensitive. I ask, too sensitive for what? Disrespect? I don't apologize for leaving anymore. I don't explain it. I don't make it soft enough for them to feel okay with it. Because I didn't leave out of confusion. I left with clarity. He used to say, "You're overthinking again." But I wasn't overthinking. I was finally thinking clearly. And the clearest thought I ever had. He doesn't love you. He loves your silence. I look back now and feel nothing. No rage. No sadness. Just relief. Relief that I got out before I lost the last parts of me that still knew the difference between love and control. I used to wonder if I was broken. If I was just too complicated to be loved the right way. Now I know the truth, I wasn't broken. I was just too whole for someone who only knew how to hold fragments. I've rebuilt my boundaries from the ground up. Not walls. Just doors with locks and rules. I don't chase red flags anymore. I don't romanticize chaos. I don't mistake surviving with being loved. I've redefined love altogether. Now it sounds like peace. Looks like consistency. Feels like freedom. And the most powerful thing I've done. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped performing for people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I stopped softening the truth so others could swallow it. And I stopped giving access to people who only wanted my vulnerability as leverage. He doesn't get to know how well I'm doing. He doesn't get to hear my laugh anymore. He doesn't get to watch me glow from a distance and wonder if I miss him. Because I don't. And I never will. So if you've ever had someone use your pain against you, if you've ever trusted someone with your scars, and they turn them into targets, let me remind you, you're not too much. You're just finally enough for you. And that's the only permission you'll ever need.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.